The last presidential debate, the mute button, was it used? Well, at least the threat of it worked. Early in the final U.S. presidential debate, Donald Trump and Joe Biden were more restrained. I'm sure you agree. Well, the candidates allowed each other to speak even when they went on the attack. From the opening minutes, the two candidates took opposing stances on issues like coronavirus, healthcare, and immigration. Biden called for much more aggressive federal action, warning that a dark winter was ahead. Hi, I'm Kavitha Avoye, and welcome to another edition of Decision 2020, where we try to cover issues surrounding the election that is not covered by mainstream media. Our focus in this episode of the program, the last presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
The U.S. President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden made their final arguments to voters at their second and final presidential debate, squaring off in Nashville, Tennessee, with less than 2 weeks until the big day. The debate was a much more orderly affair than the first time the two candidates met in September, with relatively few interruptions and stricter controls on speaking time. The 90-minute event featured 15-minute segments touching on the coronavirus pandemic, foreign policy, the economic struggles of American families, race, climate change, and more. The U.S. president, who is lagging in the polls, defended his way of handling the coronavirus pandemic. He criticized Biden for failing to act on a variety of Democratic proposals while he was vice president, warning that Democratic priorities would hamper the economy.
And Joe, you were vice president when some of this was happening, and it should have never happened. And I think you owe an explanation to the American people.
Both candidates were well aware that the debate presented their last opportunity to make their case before a large national audience with just 12 days until the election.
How can anyone in their right mind vote for Trump? He's an idiot. He's incapable of logical thought.
Actually, I think it's pretty even right now. I think Trump's doing exactly what he has to do to keep things civil. He's not interrupting. He's not speaking over Biden. But Biden's delivering some points home, too. So I think they're both pretty even right now.
I think Trump has been a lot better than he normally is. I'm not going to lie to you, yeah. But I think that Biden has actually been cool and calm and responsive, and I'm really down with Biden. I could be wrong. I was wrong in 2016, for sure.
The debate was indeed a more restrained affair than the first encounter between the two candidates last month, when Trump and Biden attacked each other for most of the hour and a half, leaving viewers confused and angry.
He pours fuel on every single racist fire. Every single one. Started off his campaign coming down the escalator saying he's going to get rid of those Mexican rapists. He's banned Muslims because they're Muslims. He has moved around and made everything worse across the board.
Joe, I ran because of you. I ran because of Barack Obama, because you did a poor job. If I thought you did a good job, I would have never run. I would have never run. I ran because of you. I'm looking at you now. You're a politician. I ran because of you.
Interesting and quite different from what we saw the previous time. So I want to ask our guests the reason behind this shift today. Now, today we have senators in the House as guests, whom will be coming up later in the program. Yes, that's right. But first we are joined by Graylan Hekler. He's a justice advocate from Washington, D.C. Well, Graylan, welcome to Decision 2020. Since the last presidential debate, which is more of a fight than a debate, what has each candidate learned from the experience, do you think?
Well, it's a good question, I think, Kava, and that we need to sort of explore, because one of the things that happened in the first debate is that it was really a argument where one just talked over the other, and basically no one was able to hear. And basically we really saw the boorish, rude behavior of the so-called President Donald Trump. And I think that what was learned from that was that Trump felt that he needed to be more reserved, and yet strong, but more reserved in terms of trying to go on the attack without appearing that he was attacking Biden. And so he tried to do that tonight in terms of the debate. And I think that one of the things that came off very strongly was that we really are able to see how this president, the so-called president, is manipulative, is a con artist, loves to take things out of context, and loves to turn them around on people, and particularly in this case, Joe Biden.
Okay, we appreciate your comments there, Graylin. Obviously, you don't think much of the president. We're going to get back to you a little later on in the program. Well, when you take a look at the way that the focus, it seemed, of the second debate went between the two, it seemed like most of it, or a lot of it, had to deal with the coronavirus and the disagreements between the two candidates.
The first topic of the night was fighting COVID-19. Trump used his opening answer to claim the coronavirus vaccine is ready and going to be announced within weeks. He also talked about his own recovery from the virus as an example of medical progress. The U.S. president boasted that he was now immune to the disease and insisted that states like Texas and Florida had seen the virus fade away, even as case counts are on the rise across the country.
And you also said a vaccine will be coming within weeks?
Yes.
Is that a guarantee?
No, it's not a guarantee, but it will be by the end of the year.
In response, Biden once again pressed a focused and familiar line of attack against Trump, faulting him for doing, quote, virtually nothing to head off the pandemic early this year.
220,000 Americans dead. If you hear nothing else I say tonight, hear this. Anyone who's responsible for not taking control, in fact, not saying I take no responsibility initially, anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as President of the United States of America.
He also slammed the U.S. government for not having a plan as the country is heading into the coldest part of the year. The United States has the highest number of confirmed coronavirus cases and deaths in the world.
Vice President Biden, you've said you wouldn't meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions. Are there any conditions under which you would meet with him?
On the condition that he would agree that he would be drawing down his nuclear capacity to get that the Korean Peninsula should be a nuclear-free zone.
Okay, let's bring back Justice Advocate. You know what, I have to say something. The pictures that you see here, Trump, Biden, the 2020 debates, you know, I have to say, they're not the only two candidates that are actually on the ticket. You have some third-party candidates that are actually cited on the tickets where they have gotten accepted through many states across the U.S. We're going to get to that point a little later. And I have to tell our graphic artist to actually fix that too. Anyways, let's bring back Justice Advocate Graylin Hagler and ask him what he thinks about the spar over the pandemic. Okay, welcome back, Graylin. Biden, you know, he kept attacking Trump over his government's way of handling the coronavirus pandemic. Now, do you think that America would actually appear better in this pandemic if there was a Democrat in office like Biden instead of the current administration in terms of how they deal with it?
I think that's a good question, but I don't think that the issue was whether there would have been a Democrat in the office, whether it would have been approached any better. Because really what you have to deal with, you have to have people in leadership who understand that they don't know everything about everything, that there's scientists, that there's environmentalists, that there's all kinds of people that can offer kinds of advice and insight, that you need to heed them. We've had an administration that does not believe in science. We have an administration that does not believe in the environmental issues or climate change, and that poses a problem. When you look at it, really what this administration constantly talks about is money.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that. We're going to have to say goodbye to you. That's Justice Advocate Graylin Hagler there talking to us. We appreciate his comments. We have already stated that the final U.S. presidential debate was a calmer one, but it didn't mean that the candidates stopped accusing each other. I mean, both candidates questioned one another's healthcare plans, for example. And in the meantime, Trump accused Biden of incompetence during his time as the U.S. VP. And Biden accused the U.S. president of heartlessness for separating migrant families and inflaming racial tensions. All right, right now it's time to take a look at where these two candidates actually stand. Let's take a look at this particular graph that we have here. In terms of the national polls that you see here, ultimately, from the beginning, you can see that Biden has been ahead. Taking a look at the graph there, starting from January of this year all the way through to October, you can see Biden slowly but surely increasing its lead in terms of the difference between himself and Trump, widening the gap that you see between the red line and the blue line, of which at this point, with 10 days left until Election Day, you can see that he is ahead at 51%, with Trump at 43%. Now, keep in mind that there's always a margin of error that is incorporated in these graphs. Usually, the margin of error is anywhere between 5% to at the most 10%, but usually it's about 5%.
How we behaved as an agency, as individuals, was unacceptable. And I know that we caused further fear to you in a space that's already so fearful for so many African Americans.
Well, healthcare has always been a major issue in the U.S. politics and the presidential elections. No wonder these two candidates are constantly arguing over it.
They have 180 million plans, 180 million people, families, under what he wants to do, which will basically be socialized medicine. He won't even have a choice. They want to terminate 180 million plans.
He's already cost the American people, because of his terrible handling of the COVID virus and the economic spillover, 10 million people have lost their private insurance. And he wants to take away 22 million more people who have it under Obamacare, and over 110 million people with pre-existing conditions. And all the people from COVID are going to have pre-existing conditions. What are they going to do?
That's really a good point that he's making there, because of the fact that, if that happens, then these people are not going to be covered. And of course, we're looking at the post-pandemic. Hopefully, it's going to arrive with a vaccine. Anyways, we are now going to be joined by former U.S. presidential candidate and Senator Mike Gravel from Springfield, Massachusetts. Mike Gravel, welcome to Decision 2020. Both Trump and Biden talked about healthcare plans. We just heard what they said, and each had their own plan for the Affordable Care Act, but to this day, millions of Americans still don't have health care in the U.S. Do you think this will change, or what the two candidates have said is just for the sake of campaigning, do you think?
First off, if Biden gets elected, it will change. And it may not change exactly the way Biden is representing. Biden is still trying to act like a moderate in this regard. But the progressives under Bernie Sanders and others are pushing very hard for health care for all. And so I think the first push is going to be to turn around and arrange for Medicare to come down to $60 to $50 and try to absorb the volumes of people that way. And at the same time, going out and making sure that what's left of Obamacare is covering the 20 million people that aren't covered. So there's no question in my mind that a Democratic leadership will attempt and succeed in covering everybody's healthcare needs in the foreseeable future.
Okay, we're going to thank Mike Gravel there. We appreciate it, Mike. He's the former U.S. presidential candidate and U.S. Senator. Well, let's go back in time here and look at 4 years ago. President Trump wrote a hard line on immigration to the Republican nomination and ultimately the White House. Now, when the topic came up on Thursday night's debate, however, he tried to downplay some of the more extreme steps that he has taken while in office.
When asked about his administration's policy of separating the children from the parents of undocumented migrants, Trump tried to turn the conversation to the detention facilities created by the Obama administration to house unaccompanied minor immigrants. Biden was quick to respond. He noted that the children Trump was detaining came over with their parents and that the policy was making the U.S. a laughingstock.
Another question to you.
These 500 plus kids came with parents. They separated them at the border to make it a disincentive to come to begin with. Real tough. We're really strong. And guess what? They cannot, it's not coyotes didn't bring them over. Their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents. And it makes us a laughingstock and violates every notion of who we are as a nation.
The two sides then clashed over race, with Trump once again insisting that he is the least racist president America has ever had.
I am the least racist person in this room.
In the first presidential debate, Trump talked himself into trouble when the topic turned to race relations, as he danced around whether to directly condemn white supremacist groups. This time around, the president was considerably more quick. He boasted about his bipartisan criminal justice reform and funding for historically black colleges. But still, figures show that many American voters see him as a racist person.
I was just appalled by how he was trying to paint this picture of suburban women falling into his camp and being as racist as he is. We ask all of our members to send it. It's basically a letter from management telling him he's fired and that he does not have the vote of suburban women, that he does not know what we want or what we're looking for or how we feel. He doesn't speak for us.
Okay, let's bring in our next guest on the show. Another senator, I promise you, former member of the Virginia State Senate, Richard Hayden Black, joins us. Richard, welcome. Let's take a look at the U.S. president calling the undocumented immigrants people with the lowest IQ. He also avoided to talk about white supremacy and instead attacked the Black Lives Matter protesters. What kind of message do you think he wants to send Americans? I mean, what kind of Americans will people see as the president in the next 4 years? If he's going to be the one that they're going to elect?
The Black Lives Matter is not simply a race-based group. About 70% of them are white, and they are a Marxist group. They're a revolutionary group, and they really are seeking an overthrow of the government.
Interesting that you say that. BLM, or Black Lives Matter, is a group that was created mainly due to police brutality against African Americans, which then morphed into discriminations against blacks. Its members actually are mostly African Americans.
Okay, we appreciate that. That's Richard Hayden Black, former member of the Virginia State Senate, talking to us there. Thank you so much for that. Well, let's take a look at some media posts, social media posts on this. Frank Luntz writing, my focus group's words to describe Trump tonight: controlled, reserved, poised, con artist, surprisingly presidential. And on Biden, vague, unspecific, elusive, defensive, and grandfatherly. The last one leaves a bit of a question mark here. Okay, the next tweet comes from Ella Wild, who said, for me, the most vile thing Trump said was good as a response to the comment that he had separated 500 plus kids and now has no idea where the parents are. Well, as a parent, this is devastating. Also, Donald blatantly ignores the question about systemic racism. Now, that we do know about Trump in terms of systemic racism, how he ignores that somewhat. But in terms of the, the separation, I mean, that truly is representation of Trump, separating kids from their families. Well, in the final presidential debate before Election Day, Trump and Biden were asked to relay what they would say on Inauguration Day to voters who did not support their candidacies. This is what they said.
In the end, when asked what they would say to the American voters, Trump focused his remarks on the economy and touted the low unemployment rates across a variety of demographics.
Success is going to bring us together. We are on the road to success, but I'm cutting taxes, and he wants to raise everybody's taxes, and he wants to put new regulations on everything. He will kill it. If he gets in, you will have a depression, the likes of which you've never seen.
Biden, meanwhile, said he will be a president who represents all Americans, including those who did not cast their ballot for him, and said he will put science over fiction.
What is on the ballot here is the character of this country: decency, honor, respect, treating people with dignity, making sure that everyone has an even chance. And I'm going to make sure you get that. You haven't been getting it the last 4 years.
This was the last debate before the 2020 election. The US President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden laid out starkly different versions of America as they met on the debate stage on Thursday night. Now it's all up to the American voters and also the electoral colleges.
All right, time for third-party candidates and independents. I told you we're going to cover them. I mean, these are voices that matter, and some are actually on the ballot, but you wouldn't know it. You, meaning Americans, and also the ones outside of the U.S. Well, we covered them here, and here's what some of them had to say on social media. Let's take a look. First, going on to Joe Jurgensen, who is the Libertarian candidate who made a point, that is, to highlight how both candidates focused on each other's corruption based on the debate, adding, how can you trust either with our economy, taxpayer money, or to act ethically at the White House? She also said that voting for more government spending inevitably leads to higher taxes to pay for it, now or in the future, which she said would slash federal spending and make government much smaller. Next, Howie Hawkins from the Green Party. He proposed the Green New Deal back in 2010, saying how another decade has passed for failing to act on it, with no hopes pinned on Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Next up, Rocky De La Fuente from the Alliance Party. He said both Biden and Trump made fools of themselves, adding that Latinos and Hispanics are tired of both parties who don't include independent parties. Here's Don Blankenship, the Constitution candidate. He says here that Washington, D.C. has a spending party. Americans who pay taxes are not invited, but they're the ones who are going to pay the bill. And finally, tweet 5 is from Brock Pierce, an independent candidate who said the U.S. two-party system is the same side of the same coin. Real change is needed, something to emerge that transcends partisan politics. Time now for a surprise. Let me test your memory here. Do you know who this man is? Well, this is none other than world-famous Noam Chomsky, who is a U.S. linguist and philosopher. And these are his thoughts on some very important issues not covered by the candidates, and his views. Things that mainstream media don't cover, but we do on Decision 2020.
There's no coherent leadership. It's chaotic. The presidency, the White House, is in the hands of a sociopathic megalomaniac. Among his voting base, there are lots of people who don't like international organizations, think we're on top, we should be by ourselves, nobody tells us anything. So it's good to pick up some votes from these sectors if you defund and maybe move on to disband the WHO. Of course, it has consequences. As soon as Trump came in, his first move was to dismantle the entire pandemic prevention machinery and to start defunding the Center for Disease Control, which would maybe 70% of the population, something roughly like that. It just gets by from 1 week to the next, one paycheck to the next paycheck. Anything goes wrong, they don't have anything. The United States doesn't have has very weak unemployment insurance as compared to other countries.
How do you like that for an ending? That does it for today. Don't forget to catch our next episode. I've been Kaveh Taghli. On behalf of the whole team here, thanks for watching Decision 2020. Until next time.